Now the next sutta is 36, Mahasaccaka Sutta, the greater discourse to Saccaka. Thus have I heard, on one occasion the Blessed One was living at Vesali in the great wood, in the hall with the peaked roof. Now on that occasion, when it was morning, the Blessed One had finished dressing and had taken his bowl and outer robe, desiring to go into Vesali for alms. Then as Saccaka, the Niganta's son, was walking and wandering for exercise, he came to the hall with the peaked roof in the great wood. The Venerable Ananda saw him coming in the distance and said to the Blessed One, Venerable Sir, here comes Saccaka, the Niganta's son, a debater and a clever speaker, regarded by many as a saint. He wants to discredit the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha. It would be good if the Blessed One would sit down for a while out of compassion. The Blessed One sat down on the seat made ready. Then Saccaka, the Niganta's son, went up to the Blessed One and exchanged greetings with him. Stop here for a moment. So this must be later, after the first debate with the Buddha. Still, Venerable Ananda felt that this guy is still out to discredit the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha. So he asked the Buddha to sit down for a while to engage in talk with this fellow. When this courteous and amiable talk was finished, he sat down at one side and said to the Blessed One, Master Gotama, there are some recluses and Brahmins who abide pursuing development of body, but not development of mind. They are touched by bodily painful feeling. In the past, when one was touched by bodily painful feeling, one's thighs would become rigid, one's heart would burst, hot blood would gush from one's mouth, and one would go mad, go out of one's mind. So then the mind was subservient to the body. The body wielded mastery over it. Why is that? Because the mind was not developed. But there are some recluses and Brahmins who abide pursuing development of mind, but not development of body. They are touched by mental painful feeling. In the past, when one was touched by mental painful feeling, one's thighs would become rigid, one's heart would burst, hot blood would gush from one's mouth, and one would go mad, go out of one's mind. So then the body was subservient to the mind. The mind wielded mastery over it. Why is that? Because the body was not developed, Master Gotama. It has occurred to me, surely Master Gotama's disciples abide pursuing development of mind, but not development of body. Stop here for a moment. You see this ignoramus, this Saccaka, he doesn't know what is development of body and what is development of mind. So he assumes that those ascetics who practice ascetic practices and torture their body, they are pursuing development of body. That's why he says those who abide pursuing development of body, they are touched by bodily painful feeling. And then he thinks that those who pursue development of mind, they in the same way they torture their mind so that they get mental painful feeling. So he sees that the Buddha and the Buddha's disciples are not practicing all these ascetic practices, the external ascetics practice. So he assumes that the body, that the Buddha, here he says, the body is not development. He says, surely Master Gotama's disciples abide pursuing development of mind, but not development of body. So because the Buddha's disciples don't torture their body, he says the Buddha's disciples are not developing their body, but they seem to be developing their mind. They seem to be meditating a lot, and then he thinks by meditating a lot, they're getting a lot of mental pain. So he thinks that the Buddha, his disciples are pursuing development of mind only. Then the Buddha said, but Agivesana, what have you learned about development of body? And he said, well, there are, for example, Nanda Vacha, Kisa Sankicha, Makali Gosala. They go naked, rejecting conventions, licking their hands, not coming when asked, not stopping when asked. They do not accept food brought or food specially made or an invitation to a meal. They receive nothing from a pot, from a bowl, across a threshold, across a stick, across a pestle, from two eating together, from a pregnant woman, from a woman giving suck, from a woman lying with a man, from where food is advertised to be distributed, from where a dog is waiting, from where flies are buzzing. They accept no fish or meat. They drink no liquor, wine, or fermented brew. They keep to one house, to one morsel. They keep to 2 houses, to 2 morsels. 3, 4, up to 7 houses and 7 morsels. They live on 1 saucerful a day, on 2 saucerfuls a day. 3, 4, up to 7 saucerfuls a day. They take food once a day, once every 2 days, once every 3, 4, 5, up to once every 7 days, and so on, up to once every fortnight. They dwell pursuing the practice of taking food at stated intervals. Stop here for a moment. So here, you see this list. When the Buddha asked him, what do you know about development of body? He mentions all these ascetic practices that external sex ascetics practice. And some of them, you see, they don't accept food from a pregnant woman, from a woman giving suck, from where a dog is waiting, from where flies are buzzing. This is compassion without wisdom, because they think if they accept food from a pregnant woman, then the baby in the womb will not have enough to eat. When they accept food from a woman giving suck, then the baby also will not have enough milk to eat. If they accept food where a dog is waiting, then the dog will not have enough to eat. So our compassion for the dog. And then when flies are buzzing about, they think that if they accept food, the flies also will not have a chance to eat. So this is stupid compassion without wisdom. And then the others, like ascetic practices, they only bake from 1 house or only bake from 2 houses, maximum only 7 houses. And then they take 1 saucerful of food a day or 2 or 3, etc. And also eating once a day, once every 2 days, up to once every 14 days. But when they eat as much as they can. Then after that they starve for 13 days, after that they eat again. So this is what he thinks is development of body. And then the Buddha said, but do they subsist on so little agivesana? And he said, no, Master Gotama. Sometimes they consume excellent hard food, eat excellent soft food, taste excellent delicacies, drink excellent drinks. Thereby they again regain their strength, fortify themselves and become fat. And the Buddha said, what they earlier abandoned agivesana, they later gather together again. That is how there is increase and decrease of this body. But what have you learned about development of mind? When Saccaka, the Niganta's son, was asked by the Blessed One about development of mind, he was unable to answer. Stop here for a moment. So here, just now, his idea of development of body is to subject it to ascetic practices, painful practices. But when the Buddha asked him to describe what you mean by development of mind, he had no idea how to develop the mind. Then the Blessed One told him, what you have just spoken of as development of body, agivesana, is not development of body according to the Dhamma in the Noble One's discipline. Since you do not know what development of body is, how could you know what development of mind is? Nevertheless, agivesana, as to how one is undeveloped in body and undeveloped in mind, listen and attend closely to what I shall say. Yes, sir, Saccaka, the Niganta's son, replied. The Blessed One said, how agivesana is one undeveloped in body and undeveloped in mind? Here agivesana, pleasant feeling arises in an untaught ordinary person. Touched by that pleasant feeling, he lusts after pleasure and continues to lust after pleasure. That pleasant feeling of his ceases. With the cessation of the pleasant feeling, painful feeling arises. Touched by that painful feeling, he sorrows, grieves and laments. He weeps, beating his breast, and becomes distraught. When that pleasant feeling has arisen in him, it invades his mind and remains because body is not developed. And when that painful feeling has arisen in him, it invades his mind and remains because mind is not developed. Anyone in whom in this double manner arisen pleasant feeling invades his mind and remains because body is not developed, and arisen painful feeling invades his mind and remains because mind is not developed, is thus undeveloped in body and undeveloped in mind. So here the Buddha says that a person who is undeveloped in body, when pleasant feeling arises, then he lusts after it. And one undeveloped in mind, when painful feeling arises, it also invades his mind and remains. And how Agivesana is one developed in body and developed in mind. Here Agivesana, pleasant feeling arises in a well-taught noble disciple. Touched by that pleasant feeling, he does not lust after pleasure or continue to lust after pleasure. That pleasant feeling of his ceases. With the cessation of the pleasant feeling, painful feeling arises. Touched by that painful feeling, he does not sorrow, grieve and lament. He does not weep, beating his breast and become distraught. When that pleasant feeling has arisen in him, it does not invade his mind and remain, because body is developed. And when that painful feeling has arisen in him, it does not invade his mind and remain, because mind is developed. Anyone in whom in this double manner arisen pleasant feeling does not invade his mind and remain, because body is developed, and arisen painful feeling does not invade his mind and remain, because mind is developed, is thus developed in body and developed in mind. I'll stop here for a moment. So here developed in body is the reverse. Person developed in body, when pleasant feeling arises, he does not lust after it. And person developed in mind, when painful feeling arises, he does not sorrow, grieve and lament, he accepts it. According to the commentary, one developed in body means one who has insight, and one developed in mind means one who has concentration, jhanas. They assume when suffering comes, they enter jhana. But I think these two are developed in body and developed in mind, and refer to an Arya. You see a person with right view, an Arya, he knows the danger of pleasant feeling. So when any pleasant feeling arises, he knows it is impermanent. So he does not crave for it. And then when painful feeling arises, he also accepts it. And it does not evade his mind and remain, because he does not think there's no proliferation of thoughts. As the Buddha says in the Sutta, an ordinary person has two kinds of suffering, bodily pain and mental pain, whereas an Arya has only bodily suffering. An Arya does not have mental suffering, because he does not think too much about it. He accepts whatever comes as karma vipaka. And Saccaka said, I have confidence in Master Gautama thus. Master Gautama is developed in body and developed in mind. And the Buddha said, surely Agivesana, your words are offensive and discourteous, but still I will answer you. Since I shaved off my hair and beard, put on the yellow robe, and went forth from the home life into homelessness, it has not been possible for arisen pleasant feeling to invade my mind and remain, or for arisen painful feeling to invade my mind and remain. Let's stop here for a moment. So here you see, this Saccaka, he says, I have confidence that Master Gautama is developed in body and developed in mind. So the Buddha says, your words are offensive and discourteous. Why? Because he's asking the Buddha to say whether the Buddha is developed in body or developed in mind. And a lay person is not supposed to ask a monk about his attainments, and a monk is not supposed to speak of his attainments. So you should not ask a monk, have you attained jhana? Have you attained this and attained sotapanna? All this, it is offensive. So the Buddha says, ever since he went forth, arisen pleasant feelings do not invade his mind, or arisen painful feelings also do not invade his mind and remain. And Saccaka asked, has there never arisen in Master Gotama a feeling so pleasant that it could invade his mind and remain? Has there never arisen in Master Gotama a feeling so painful that it could invade his mind and remain? And the Buddha said, why not, Agavesana? Here, Agavesana, before my enlightenment, while I was still only an unenlightened bodhisattva, I thought, household life is crowded and dusty. Life gone forth is wide open. It is not easy, while living in a home, to lead the holy life, utterly perfect and pure as a polished shell. Suppose I shave off my hair and beard, put on the yellow robe, and go forth from the home life into homelessness. Later, while still young, a black-haired young man, endowed with the blessing of youth, in the prime of life, etc. Here the Buddha describes exactly what he said in Sutta 26. That's page 256. I won't read the whole thing, but I will say basically. So the Buddha said that in front of his parents he left the home life. Then he went to learn the meditation under Alara Kalama first. But because he did not attain enlightenment, he left him. But he attained the base of nothingness, the arupa. Then after that he went to look for another meditation teacher. That was Uddaka Ramaputta, and he was able to attain the state of meditation that Uddaka Ramaputta attained, which is the highest arupa, the base of neither perception nor non-perception. But still he did not become enlightened. So he left Uddaka Ramaputta. Then after that he went through 6 years of ascetic practices, for which he suffered a lot and became so thin that he nearly died. Then after that he decided to go on the middle path, and then he found a suitable place to practice by the banks of the river near Uruvela. Then the Buddha said, now these three similes occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. Suppose there were a wet, sappy piece of wood lying in water, and a man came with an upper fire stick, thinking, I shall light a fire, I shall produce heat. What do you think, Agavesana? Could the man light a fire and produce heat by taking the upper fire stick and rubbing it against the wet, sappy piece of wood lying in the water? No, Master Gotama. Why not? Because it is a wet, sappy piece of wood and is lying in water. Eventually the man would reap only weariness and disappointment. So too, Agavesana, as to those recluses and Brahmins who still do not live bodily and mentally withdrawn from sensual pleasures, and whose sensual desire, affection, infatuation, thirst, and fever for sensual pleasures has not been fully abandoned and suppressed internally. Even if those good recluses and Brahmins feel painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, they are incapable of knowledge and vision and supreme enlightenment. And even if those good recluses and Brahmins do not feel painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, they are incapable of knowledge and vision and supreme enlightenment. This was the first simile that occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. I'll stop here for a moment. So here, during the Buddha's days, when you want to make fire, you take an upper fire stick, is held vertically, and then you get another piece which is put horizontally, and then you rub until heat is generated. Then they put some fine wood shavings or anything to start the fire. But this bottom piece, the Buddha says, suppose you use this bottom piece, is wet externally and wet internally. The whole piece has been lying in water, so it's soaked with water, and outside also is wet. There's no hope of making a fire. In the same way, if a monk is bodily and mentally not withdrawn from sensual desire, then there's no hope of enlightenment. Bodily withdrawn from sensual pleasures means he does not use the body to engage in sensual pleasures, and mentally withdrawn from sensual pleasures also. He does not think about sensual pleasures. Again, Agivesana. A second simile occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. Suppose there were a wet, sappy piece of wood lying on dry land, far from water, and a man came with an upper fire stick, thinking, I shall light a fire, I shall produce heat. What do you think, Agivesana? Could the man light a fire and produce heat by taking the upper fire stick and rubbing it against the wet, sappy piece of wood lying on dry land, far from water? No, Master Gotama. Why not? Because it is a wet, sappy piece of wood, even though it is lying on dry land far from water. Eventually, the man will reap only weariness and disappointment. So too, Agivesana, as to those recluses and Brahmins who live bodily and mentally withdrawn from sensual pleasures, but whose sensual desire, affection, infatuation, thirst and fever for sensual pleasures has not been fully abandoned and suppressed internally. Even if those good recluses and Brahmins feel painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, they are incapable of knowledge and vision and supreme enlightenment. And even if those good recluses and Brahmins do not feel painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, they are incapable of knowledge and vision and supreme enlightenment. This was the second simile that occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. Stop here for a moment. So here the second piece of wood that the Buddha says is unable to start a fire is the wood inside is dry because it's been lying on dry land. But outside is wet, just like a piece of wood, suppose on the ground, and the rain came last night, so it became wet. So if you want to make a fire, you won't be able to. So the Buddha says, in the same way, there are some monks, bodily and mentally they are withdrawn from sensual pleasures. That means they don't engage in sensual pleasures through the body, and they also don't think of sensual pleasures, using the mind to daydream and fantasize and all these things. But the sensual desire has not been fully abandoned and suppressed internally. That means deep inside, the desire has not been rooted out. And then again, Agivesana. A third simile occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. Suppose there were a dry, sapless piece of wood lying on dry land, far from water, and a man came with an upper fire stick, thinking, I shall light a fire, I shall produce heat. What do you think, Agivesana? Could the man light a fire and produce heat by rubbing it against a dry, sapless piece of wood lying on dry land, far from water? Yes, Master Gotama. Why so? Because it is a dry, sapless piece of wood, and it is lying on dry land, far from water. So too, Agivesana, as to those recluses and Brahmins who live bodily and mentally withdrawn from sensual pleasures, and whose desire, affection, infatuation, thirst and fever for sensual pleasures has been fully abandoned and suppressed internally, even if those good recluses and Brahmins feel painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, they are capable of knowledge and vision and supreme enlightenment. And even if those good recluses and Brahmins do not feel painful, racking, piercing feelings due to exertion, they are capable of knowledge and vision and supreme enlightenment. This was the third simile that occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. These are the three similes that occurred to me spontaneously, never heard before. Stop here for a moment. So these three similes, the first one is the wood is wet inside and outside. The second one, inside is dry but outside is wet. The third one is dry inside and dry outside. Only the third one you can produce fire. So in the same way, the Buddha says, for a person to become enlightened, he has not only to be bodily and mentally withdrawn from sensual pleasures, but the sensual desire must be fully abandoned and suppressed internally. How can you abandon and suppress this sensual desire internally? This you have to look at the hindrances of the 5 hindrances. One of them is sensual desire. If a person, for example, he understands the Dhamma, he understands that sensual desire is unwholesome, it can lead to repeated rebirth. So having understood the Dhamma, he does not engage in sensual pleasures, and he does not want to think about sensual pleasures also. But because he has not eliminated this hindrance of sensual desire, which is the first hindrance out of the 5 hindrances. If he has not eliminated this hindrance, then the tendency to want to enjoy sensual pleasures is still there. For example, if a person practices, like nowadays they practice vipassana meditation, they don't want to practice samatha. So they know the Dhamma to the extent that they are bodily and mentally withdrawn from sensual pleasures. But because the sensual desire, the hindrance of sensual desire is not rooted out, in their dreams they can still want to engage in sensual pleasures. But person who has attained the jhanas and eliminated this sensual desire, then he would not have the tendency to want to engage in sensual pleasures. So he has a chance of becoming enlightened. He is like this third type of wood. Again, we consider it in terms of the factors. A person who is a Sotapanna, the Buddha says, if he has not attained Sotapanna, does not need to attain the 4 jhanas. Sotapanna is Sakadagami, first and second fruition. Arya, they have eliminated three factors. The second fruition, Sakadagami, eliminated three factors and also weakened greed, hatred and delusion. So it is only the Anagamin who has destroyed the factor of ill will and sensual desire. A person who to be able to become an Anagamin, you got to have 4 jhanas. So when a person has perfect samadhi, 4 jhanas, then this sensual desire is abandoned. So sometimes that's why in the suttas the Buddha says, if you were to slander even an external ascetic who has gotten rid of sensual desire, that means he has attained the jhanas, your karmic offense is very great. So you can see from here, if a person has not attained the jhanas, there is no hope. It's just like the sappy piece of wood. Then the Buddha continued, I thought, suppose with my teeth clenched and my tongue pressed against the roof of my mouth, I beat down, constrain and crush mind with mind. So with my teeth clenched and my tongue pressed against the roof of my mouth, I beat down, constrain and crush mind with mind. While I did so, sweat ran from my armpits. Just as a strong man might seize a weaker man by the head or shoulders and beat him down, constrain him and crush him, so too with my teeth clenched and my tongue pressed against the roof of my mouth, I beat down, constrain and crush mind with mind, and sweat ran from my armpits. But although tireless energy was aroused in me and unremitting mindfulness was established, my body was overwrought and uncalm because I was exhausted by the painful striving. But such painful feeling that arose in me did not invade my mind and remain. I stop here for a moment. So here you see, the Buddha was trying to use his mind to crush his mind. What does this mean? Because a person like the Buddha, he wants to become enlightened. And then when he analyzes, he knows it is this consciousness, this awareness, this mind that creates all the pain. As long as we are aware, as long as the mind is working, we are aware of pain, we are aware of suffering. But if this mind were to stop working, then we are not aware of any pain. where there's no more suffering, when the mind just stops. So because he didn't know the Dhamma, he used the strength of his mind to crush his mind. So here you can see here that the Buddha did not succeed. But I think there are some external ascetics who managed to succeed. So what happens when they crush the mind with mind and the consciousness ceases, then they become unconscious. That's why there's a class of beings called Asanya Satta. Asanya Satta are supposed to be a class of beings in the fourth jhana heaven. And they are just a blob of body with no mind. They are not conscious at all. They have no perception, no consciousness, no feeling. So probably they are this type of ascetics who use mind to crush mind, and they succeeded. So when they were reborn, the mind stopped working. But they'll be there for a very long time. I don't know how many world cycles. And after that, when they've used up their time, suddenly the mind starts working and they fall out from there. But because they have not become an Arya, they'll still be in the round of rebirths, up and down. So here is interesting how the Buddha tried to one of the ways to get out of samsara, but did not succeed.